Hello, everyone. I'm Kristen Narcisi, representing MicroGrid Networks, a renewable energy developer and operator based in New York City. I lead data initiatives, which is primarily a proprietary GIS platform. And today I'm sharing Mapping the Invisible Grid, which is part story, part cautionary tale, and part open source experiment. So before we get too technical, I just want to start with this photo here. I didn't take it, but we've all taken this picture before, the one out the plane window that never turns out right, but we take it anyways, because there's something about the way the city glows, how it sprawls across the grounds like a circuit board, and from up here, you can trace the veins of the highways, neighborhoods, and maybe even the power itself. It feels like you're looking at the grid. And in a way you are. But what you're seeing is just scratching the surface, a thin layer of something much larger, something most of us never really see. So let's kick it off. Now a little closer to the ground. When I was a kid, I'd stare out the car window and make up stories about the power lines, you know, back in the pre-tablet days, not to age myself. They looked like ladders to nowhere. They were everywhere, familiar, yet unknown. But now that I work in energy, I can't unsee them. I know which lines are transmission, which ones are distribution, and yes, even on vacation, I'll point out a substation and I'll tell you whether it's stepping up or down. It's a habit that I can't stop. So, the US electric grid is often called the largest machine in the world. Millions of parts working in sync to power nearly every aspect of modern life. From the lights in your home to the server running this presentation. It stretches across every state, every region, every time zone, yet somehow we barely notice it. For most of us, that machine stays hidden in plain sight. We rely on it every second, but we rarely think about what it takes to keep it running. So allow me to pull back the curtain a little. When we talk about the grid, what does that really mean? So I see the best way is to divide and conquer here. So let's break it down. And to preface, I'm no electrical engineer. I didn't come from this world. My background is in biomedical informatics. So when I started this NYSERDA Clean Energy internship, I had to learn how the grid works and I had to learn fast. And I found it's helpful to think of it like a connected chain. And it starts with generation. Power plants and renewables that create the electricity, following by the transmission, which is big towers carrying high voltage power through long distances to reduce loss. And then there's also substations in between those that both step up the power and then step it down. And then finally, distribution side, the purple, that's the local networks that delivers the energy to homes, businesses, and hospitals. And it's this last piece, distribution, is where my company operates. And then, of course, where things tend to get complicated, especially in dense urban areas like New York City. So let's take a closer look at what I'm talking about when it comes to distribution. So if you're from the suburbs or a rural area, and this is the second time I've been to Seattle, so even parts of Seattle, I've noticed them, you've seen these type of structures before. The poles, the wires lining the streets, and then the green boxes sitting quietly on a lawn. And what this represents is this is what's called the radial network. And what that means is the power flows one way from the substation along the line through a transformer into homes. And with the pole, you can kind of see the transformer. It looks like that trash can looking thing up there. That's the transformer. It's stepping it down to the homes, to whatever the last client is. And this system, it's simple, it's cheap, and when it works, it works. But when one line goes down, everything downstream from it loses its power. It kind of reminds me of those old school Christmas lights, from like the 60s, 70s. My grandparents had them. And when one light burned out, the whole string went dark. So same system. And that setup works fine when there's a lot of space, when density is low, when redundancy isn't critical. but with dense urban areas, with big cities, they needed something else. So these pictures, this was New York City back in the day, in the early days of electrification. Same radial logic, stacked vertically. Each building needed its own line, and those poles multiplied, the wires tangled, and the sky filled with a web of cables. And to be fair, they're also sharing space with, like, phone lines and I think telegram lines at the time. But still, what started as infrastructure became an eyesore, and worse, dangerous. There was fires, electrocution, frequent outages. The system simply couldn't keep up with the city's growth. Something had to change. This wasn't going to work in New York City. So, modern times, grid beneath our feet. The city began to bury the grid, but it didn't just hide the wires. It completely changed how electricity moves. Con Edison, which is our local utility, I didn't actually know this fact until I researched it for this presentation, but they operate the largest underground electric distribution system in the world. 96% of New York City's electric load and 92% of its customers are all served through this underground network. And here's a better diagram that shows specifically what we got going on in New York City. So you still have the radial areas. They mostly exist in the kind of the outer borough and Staten Island. I don't know if that's inner or outer borough, but whatever. We don't think about them much. And the underground system serves most of the city. And what the difference is, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, trying to show where we are here. So yeah, that's the radial network. This is what I'm talking about, the underground network. So it's different because it's interconnected. And what that means is power doesn't travel one way anymore. It flows through these mesh of lines, the blue lines here in this case. And then they step down again and they flow into those purple lines. And with that, they're constantly balancing each other. And that makes the system resilient, but it also makes it opaque because for battery storage developers like us, like my company, this complexity matters. Because we can't just connect anywhere, and to site for a battery, we need to tie in multiple primary feeders, and those feeders have to support a bidirectional flow, both charging and discharging. So right away, we're dealing with a system that's spatially dense, electrically complex, and selectively accessible. And that's even before talking about the data. So let's talk about the data. And to preface, Con Edison is a private investor-owned utility. So they're publicly regulated, but they are a private company. So therefore, they own the internal data systems and the data behind it. And the grid itself is regulated through public assets that ratepayers fund. And the state requires utilities to publish what's called hosting capacity maps to show the grid to developers such as my company, where there might be room for new distributed energy resources like solar, EV chargers, or batteries. But here's the catch. That requirement only applies to the radial system, the overhead lines, which, is kind of frustrating because we could have easily used some LiDAR or something like that and trace it that way. But, they give us that information, but not underground. And that's a problem because most of the demand for distribution level batteries isn't where the data exists. It's in the dense areas in the network systems. And to be fair, network systems are complex. You will always need to have an interconnection study to confirm feasibility. And that makes sense. But there's still a gap when it comes to transparency. Con Ed doesn't release information for networked areas. It releases some, but it's limited, inconsistent, hard to rely on. Some feeders are listed, but they don't appear on the map, while others appear without supporting data. Yeah, so the information that they do give us for these underground metrics, they're tiled, they call them plates, approximations of charging and discharging, separate layers that are unlabeled and easy to misread. There's no voltage information, no real feeder IDs to the map, and no clear update log. So it's difficult to tell what's current and what's changed. And especially when we're electrifying the city, that information is very crucial. But other states, I found out, California, Hawaii, Massachusetts, to name a few, offer feeder level data on their hosting capacity maps, and they have downloadable GIS layers and detailed planning maps. But in New York City, the most electrified and congested part of the state, developers are planning multi-million-dollar projects using patchy, siloed, and incomplete data. And when you're looking for the rest of the information, that stuff that might help fill in the gaps, you find yourself digging through a different kind of invisibility problem. So coming from biomedical informatics, I was used to data sets that were structured, version traceable, just research heavy, so it was easy to follow. But when I came into the energy world, I was in for a shock because it entailed PDFs, scattered spreadsheets, and inconsistent formats across agencies. Some of these documents are literally scans of scans of scans, the ghost of passed down through generations of copy machines. We joke that PDFs are where data goes to die, but it stops being funny when you realize this is how cities are getting built. Through the files no one can search, update, or trace back to. And as a young data scientist, it was definitely a learning curve, but I adapted. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to keep going until the foundation shifted again. So I like to call this period the data dark ages. With the administration shift, within less than a year, everything changed. Federal programs that once maintain essential data sets, transmission lines, substations, utility boundaries, were defunded and quietly archived. There's no download button if you looked up the maps online. There's, of course, API workarounds, but still. So these resources I relied on to understand how the grid fit together simply just disappeared. Those federal data sets were the most complete and consistent view of the grid that we had, which is like a foundation for understanding the local distribution system like Con Ed and how it fits into the larger network. It was a way to trace connections and fill in those gaps. And without them, even working locally became guesswork. And utilities are supposed to collaborate and share openly, but instead, once again, operating on fragments, trying to fill in the gaps that they won't. This grid invisibility has moved from physical to informational, and for professionals like me, it feels like, once again, it's a race against time to download, archive, reconstruct as much as possible before most of this knowledge disappears. And this isn't just a loss of access, it's a loss of accountability. Because when public data goes dark, the people who depend on it are left to build in the shadows. So long before the data disappearance started, my company already learned how fragmented energy and any type of development data could be. No single data set could tell the full story. Siting battery storage requires more than just grid visibility and knowing about the grid infrastructure. It also means navigating zoning codes, floodplains, permitting rules, and environmental constraints, just to name a few, all at once. So we built a map we needed, which is a single open source GIS platform that brings everything together, spatially, visually, and dynamically. And it's not just a map, it's how we evaluate sites, make decisions, and build with intention. Along with we also do project management with our projects on the site as well. So it lets us connect the dots in real time across space, across agencies, and across the constantly shifting landscape. And when these federal data sets vanished, our platform also became something more, a living archive, proof that open tools can preserve what institutional systems let fade. Because fully open source, because we're fully open source, we're not limited to seats, license, paywalls. We can design what we need, share what we choose, and update whenever things change. In a world where energy data is fragmented and fading, the map became a foundation, a tool, we control, trust, and build upon. An example of this, August 2025, Con Edison abruptly announced halting all new energy storage projects across several parts of the city. When they gave us the notice, it was just a list of substations, no map, no explanation. And anyone outside of utilities, what does that mean? We don't know what that means. They don't give us the location of the substations. And with these network areas, which is crucial to know and relate to the substations, because these network boundaries are clusters of interconnected feeders called network boundaries, we have to understand which substations feed those network boundaries to understand, like, where can we build, where can we not build. So we were just kind of left in the dark there. A month later, they added more to the list, more substations. And then eventually they did update their hosting capacity map to show us visually like what those areas were. But because I've done research for 3 years now, trying to find those connections, I was able to, before they did the final version releasing the network boundaries, telling us these are all the places that you can't build. And so we were able to get that information before they gave it to the general public. And we were able to be like, hey, some of these that were listed, you put on the map, but the substations weren't listed in the connecting networks. And then overall, essentially this message was 85% of New York City's distribution area was now labeled constraint, and like all projects were halted. And I think through open source data, through this building, this model building, we had the ability to ask the utilities questions and not just react. And we were able to ask, why these networks, what's happening here? And they gave us an answer related to all the batteries in the queue, creating a peak because they give us an allocated slot of time when you can charge your batteries. So we were able to have a conversation because we knew all that information. We gave them grids, graphs, and we shared with other developers. And overall, this is just one of the examples of how open data enables not just access, but transparency. It gives us the ability to see why behind the decisions that affect millions of people, and to question, to verify, and hopefully plan better. And another example is earlier this year, a pair of bills were introduced in Albany that would require, one was a setback of 250 feet, and the other was 1,000 feet setback from residential buildings. So when we heard that, we had to model it, and I used QGIS, and I used open source data, NYC Map Pluto, and building footprints, and in QGIS modeled the impact, and the results were all these, like for the manufacturing areas that we are normally delegated to, like that's where you can build, we showed that there's nothing left. So a policy that was meant to improve safety and unintentionally blocked most projects from happening at all. And this is just one example of why spatial analysis matters, and having open data matters, because it lets us see the real world impact of abstract legislation before it's too late. I don't know currently where we are with that, but hopefully it doesn't pass. Finally, mapping as connection. Recent example over the summer, another battery storage developer in New York City faced backlash after starting construction. The community didn't have any idea that that was being built there, and they felt blindsided. So we decided to take a different approach. We brought our map into community meetings before anything was built. It helped us have a conversation early about zoning, grid capacity, flooding risk, right on the screen. When somebody suggested a different site, we pulled up the map live, and because it was in a radial network, we were able to tell them, hey, the voltage isn't going to support this area. And the map helped us explain the whys, not just the whats, and it turned data into a dialogue and helped build trust. And I think seeing is believing, so it helped convey that, like, hey, we're putting a lot of thought into this, and it's not just blindly, we're just going to build here for the sake of it. But overall, the grid might be invisible and the people building it, but the people it serves, because the grid might be invisible and the people building it, and the people it serves shouldn't be. Thank you. and sources.